You are a sacred mystery, forever unfolding in the great mystery of the universe. May your unfolding forever keep growing in the sacred loving grace that is your destiny, resting in the light, abiding in the heart, resting in the light, abiding in the heart, resting in the light, abiding in the heart. You are a sacred mystery. You are a sacred mystery, forever unfolding in the great mystery of the universe. May your unfolding forever keep growing in the sacred loving grace that is your destiny, resting in the light, abiding in the heart, resting in the light, abiding in the heart, resting in the light, abiding in the heart. You are a sacred mystery. So let's ring the bell and breathe. Tonight, once again, on our Wednesday fellowship, we gather together and co-create this circle of unconditional love. This circle of love contains everything that we like and everything that we do not like. So tonight we celebrate all of it. We celebrate that which brings us joy, and we celebrate that which we struggle with, because we know ultimately that also will bring us joy and that we will learn from that. So we include everyone in our circle tonight that has ever been with us. We include them now. We trust and we love as we move through this time together that we create a safe space for each other where we can say what we need to say and hear what we need to hear. Blessed be, and so it is.
glad you're here. This is A Course in Miracles, where you have found yourself in A Course in Miracles. This is A Course in Miracles, and it is a required course. Only the time that you take it is voluntary. Free will does not mean that you can establish the curriculum. It means only that you can elect what you want to take at a given time. The course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love, for that is beyond what can be taught. It does aim, however, at removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, which is your natural inheritance. The opposite of love is fear, but what is all-encompassing can have no opposite. This course can therefore be summed up very simply in this way. And we say this 3 times. We'll say these 3 things. The first one is, of course, number 1, nothing real can be threatened. Number 2, nothing unreal exists. Number 3, herein lies the peace of God. So, at this point in the year, we find ourselves in chapter 5. Chapter 5 is a description of and help us to understand the ego's thought system. That what we're battling is this system that we made, and we don't understand it. We think it's immovable and real. It's not. It's a thought system, and we made it up, and we're creating it, and we can also dismantle it. And there is reality on the other side of it. It's not like this thought system, what would we do without this thought system? No, this thought system, we've given it tasks that it does not deserve to be responsible for, like your happiness, like finding a mate, or finding what is fulfilled, or doing what is fulfilling for you. Your ego is really, really bad at making that decision for you. It's just really, really, really bad at it, because it's not tasked to do that. Originally, this is further into Jungian psychology, but your ego is really just tasked at remembering language before and after, and people's names and culture. Like you shake with the right hand in the northern hemisphere, you shake with your left hand in the southern hemisphere. That's really what your ego is supposed to remember. That stuff, people's birthdays, and or what kind of chocolate your wife likes for Valentine's Day. That's really.
But
good
I didn't
stuff.
get it.
I know. I'm collaring on the street corner. You want some roses and chocolate? I got some roses and chocolate here. She goes, don't you spend your money that way.
We had blueberry crumble.
But it's really delicious. Really delicious. I'm saying this is the ego. What's the ego's good for? It's for remembering that, if Yolanda would have been like Holy Spirit would have said, you need to get those tulips for Yolanda. If it was really, if that was the important thing, and it was the thing, the Holy Spirit would have said, don't forget the tulips for Yolanda, for her, or whatever she wanted. It would have been. It's not a thing, because it isn't what we do, is it? It isn't what we do. It's why, and the connection we're making, and the expression of the love and the being. So it could look a billion different ways, right? So we're not trying to look a certain way. We're trying to be the love of God. Right. So that evaluation of that thought system in chapter 4 is really important, because that thought system tells you when you've wholesale thrown God out of the picture, and you've got the manual, and you have the manual for how to be a human written by the ego on the other hand, right? Which is not helpful. Chapter 5. I'm sorry. Chapter 5 is the chapter that I call a calling. Just going to double back on this idea of a purpose a little bit, in saying we're going on this journey. You have a calling. It isn't just the way that you want to organize the world. It isn't just the filter of the way that you want things to be that we're going to see the world through. You actually have a calling. There's really something beautiful that wants to pour through you. Uniquely you. What I say is often is oddly specifically you. You're in this time, in this place, in this thing, doing God's work. You're going to be the linchpin for the thing that needs to happen. We all are. But it's like, take responsibility. That's what the Holy Spirit is trying to get us to do. She's trying to say, you're really important. You're part of you're this secret agent in the secret agent miracle worker network, and we got work to do. We're saving the world. I give you the means to which the world is salvation is. That's no joke. She gives you this thing. If here's this mission, and if you choose to take it, you'll become happy. And we're like, that's too much responsibility. I don't know. Happiness? I could be happy if I just let go of the way I think everything's got to be. What if I don't know what makes me happy? And that's the really big thing that we learn over and over and over again in A Course in Miracles. We keep going, man, if I just relax into the truth, I'd be a lot happier and stop thinking for myself and let the Holy Spirit do a little bit more of the guidance. It's like that country music song says, Jesus, take the wheel. Remember that song, Jesus, take the wheel? You know why? Because he's so mad. He is out of his mind. He says, I'm going to go do something stupid, that I'm going to totally regret. So it's like, yeah, if you know yourself well enough to know how insane you are, and she's going to say this in this chapter, if you could admit if you know how insane you are, what is stopping you from reaching for the part of you that isn't? Wow. If you're really upset, there's actually a part of you that knows you're upset and knows and can do something about that. So we're at chapter 5, and this is about a calling. There's a deeper something that wants to come through you and us. And God is saying, whispering in your ear, let's do this. And you're secretly really want to do it, but you can't admit it yet. And it's different for everybody. So let's get into the lesson. So the big obstacle to this is what the Holy Spirit calls guilt. And the image I used on the booklet, if you saw it, is this woman clutching her face in a very dramatic, photograph of the anguish and the guilt and the why me, and the this should not be, right? So this is chapter 5. Chapter 5 is called Healing and Wholeness. And it's about the calling, we're beginning. This is the first instance of prefiguring of chapter 19, when we start down the mountain and we are pulled toward what we want. This is the beginning of the inkling of that pull, of that flow she's trying to get us into, where things get really easy. So, healing and wholeness, and this is the ego's use of guilt. And she says some actually nice things, well, not nice things, but some kind of interesting things about the ego that I thought were unexpected in this. So it's only 8 paragraphs. So read this first one.
All right, here we go. Perhaps some of our concepts will become clearer and more personally meaningful if the ego's use of guilt is clarified. The ego has a purpose, just as the Holy Spirit has. The ego's purpose is fear, because only the fearful can be egotistic. The ego's logic is as impeccable as that of the Holy Spirit, because your mind has the means at its disposal to side with heaven or earth as it elects. But again, remember that both are in you.
Okay, she packs a lot into this paragraph, in this first paragraph. Okay, fear and our ego. Okay, the request very clearly, I'm sure you caught it, is to examine guilt when it comes up. It's like, what is this threat? Remember last week, it was like, become uncomfortable, or become sensitive to this feeling of threat, or I'm in danger. And so examine this guilt. What guilt? What is it? It's because this we've been learning about that we're in a dangerous world. The use of guilt is clarified. The ego has a purpose, just as the Holy Spirit. The ego's purpose is fear, right? Because we live in a dangerous world. If there was no dangerous world, there'd be no ego. There'd be no need for an ego to protect us from a dangerous world. It's one paradigm. So this fear maintains the ego and keeps the dangerous world in place. Right. Which means we can't be on about, celebrating our relationship or experiencing this togetherness or a peace of God, maybe. So she has a reminder here at the very end that our minds are really powerful. And that when we create with the ego, we give it actually qualities that we, our own selves have, our impeccable logic, attention to detail, all that kind of stuff. We're imbuing, that's what we're bringing to the equation. It doesn't have any of that by its own self. Because the mind has the means at its disposal to side with heaven or earth, the ego's logic is as impeccable as the Holy Spirit's. You know why? Because we're using that energy to create the energy instead of choosing to use that creative portion of ourselves to align with to align with God or create with the moment or be in the flow. No, we want something different. This should not be. Remember? So there's a lot into the first sentence. Perhaps some of our concepts will be clear if you understand like how guilt keeps us from being creative. So go ahead.
Wow. Okay, let's see. Okay, in heaven, there is no guilt because the kingdom is attained through the atonement, which releases you to create. What is truly blessed is incapable of giving rise to guilt and must give rise to joy. This makes it invulnerable to the ego because its peace is unassailable. Guilt is more than merely not of God. It is the symbol of attack on God. This is a totally meaningless concept, except to the ego. But this is the belief from which all guilt really stems. Oh, okay. An attack on God. Right.
This I used to be really kind of wary about this. I'm not gonna put one, I'm not gonna say something different. I used to be kind of wary of this explanation.
Wary, you mean?
Wary.
Yeah.
Not convinced of this explanation that A Course in Miracles gives. But the more I work with like this self-inquiry, that the method that we use is like, what's going on here? Who's asking this question? Who does it affect? It was like, who wants it different? When I keep you keep asking the question, you go in and you go, I feel like at some like this fundamental level, we talk about this I am bad belief or whatever it is, this it sucks to be me, right? It's just this fundamental I don't know how to do it. Right? I'm somebody else or something I'm missing or broken or not quite as human, or there's this fundamental something, this ennui that there's this piece that everybody else got that I didn't get, or whatever. That's what she's talking about. That's the dangerous world. That's the guilt. That's the thing that we think can be repaired. And we can't, because it's a fundamental mistake about our perception of ourselves. The mistake can be corrected, but it's a choice we're making in order to side with what paradigm of the world we want to live in. And she begins, that's what this calling is about. Because when you get a calling, you can't not be convinced out of it. Because when you introduce yourself, he goes, oh, hi, what are you doing? He goes, I'm a doctor. I'm a singer. I'm a teacher. You generally say, you generally give them your calling. Right? It's our way we say what we are kind of role and thing in the world. And that's what she's trying to get us to embed. She's trying to embed ourselves into our body, into our calling, into our place, into our neighborhoods and our communities. She says, in heaven, there is no guilt. In this moment, there is no guilt because the kingdom is attained through atonement. What you want is community in here and now and in this world because you want to create. There's no guilt in heaven because heaven is a creative place. We don't use our creativity here as much as we could because we're too busy managing our guilt because we're convinced we live in a dangerous world in which we aren't doing it right. Guilt in the atonement. The goal is to release us to be able to create. Guilt is the way that we the wet blanket that we put on ourselves because we don't want, or we're afraid, we don't believe we are to create. And the result of accepting the atonement, the result of accepting yourself as a member of the community, fully whole and healing and capable and loving and desirable and necessary for the health of the community, accepting the atonement means that what we have done, what we have made, the mistakes that we've made in the past, the way we've been unloving and unforgiving, are generally healed because we see them correctly. We go, oh, wow, I didn't even know. I was so brave for even trying that. And we look at the past. We tell the stories differently. We look at other people differently. When we begin to say, oh, I'm in this community and people make mistakes all the time. What is real, the forgiveness, this acceptance, what is real is preserved. So, oh, I made all these mistakes, or I did these things. I feel all these things. I feel so horrible about the way I treated my mom and stuff. We join the atonement. We decide to be here. We decide to be a part of the community and help and do what, and join the calling, be a part of our calling. And what happens to our guilt? We go, oh, I guess all of that took me here. I guess I had to learn all of that. Thank you for being patient with me. And we let it go. We go, oh, I don't want it to be any different because I have the atonement now. And I realize I always had the atonement. And you were never stopping me from my happiness. Because once you get it, all the things, all the stories we told about why we weren't happy and who stood in our way end up being bull crap. Once we reach the atonement, that's what she's getting it to say. Guilt is more than merely not of God. It's a symbol on the attack on God. God's got things all figured out. God being in reality is God having all things figured out because it's here, because it's already working, because it's here. So she contrasts the rest of this paragraph with the difference between joy and guilt. And it's funny, she doesn't say happiness and guilt. She says joy and guilt. Or like peace and guilt. She says joy. So she contrasts joy, the joy of heaven, versus the guilt of a dangerous world. So the joy is when you're truly blessed. It's the example of being truly blessed. It's the example of being invulnerable. Joy as the example of being invulnerable. Because isn't it true that when you're happy, you do feel invulnerable?
Yeah.
Who feels like a superwoman on their wedding day? Joy is unassailable peace. The joy of a child is unassailable. I mean, we know these things already, but we don't really think about this. Oh, if that's the truth, I can choose that. I don't have to wait for it to happen to be the mercy of the world. This is reality. It's the miracle part, right? Chapter 1, joy. She says joy is invulnerable to disruption.
Wow. Joy is invulnerable to disruption.
If it comes from the Holy Spirit's joy, the joy of living. So that's why I say around here, like you always hear me say, joy is your default setting. This is what I mean.
Yeah.
The peace is the joy is where the joy of being and joie de vivre and all of that, as contrast to guilt. Guilt, as you'll recognize, it's always disruptive. It engenders fear. It is divisive. In fact, it obeys the laws of division, right? Guilt chops everything up. And it's a symbol of the ego because it's separate. I want to do it. I want to do everything myself, and I want all the credit. And we think it's a symbol of an attack on God, right? Because she's going to explain a little bit earlier, and the kind of part I was explaining, like I was a little worried about this explanation, but the longer I work with this, the deeper I get that I understand this. And it's the idea that this guilt, this attack on God, is kind of the idea that we could break God. That God would be so mad at us, or like say, oh, you ruined it. You ruined it. It's not possible that we could steal life from God, or that we could get it wrong, or that we broke God, or any of those things. It's impossible. And if God was so putting down these rules and making the borders and boundaries and stuff like that, she can take care of it quite easily herself without, us going, managing it all in the dangerous world. So
I think we have some.
okay, Rosemary says Eileen got up early. She's going to bed.
Okay.
Oh, she says good night.
Good night,
Oh,
Eileen.
we love you, Eileen.
Good night,
Phil,
Eileen. Good night,
I know.
Eileen. I'll see you in my dreams.
Truly. So the contrast. So what are the thought system? What would the calling be? How would what? So the calling is joy. It's like follow. It's another idea of follow your joy. And guilt is there to make sure that you don't become a cooperative component and experience the love and joy and the peace of the world and your calling and yours delivered to the world and your sharing of the world, and so that somebody else can take your creativity and work to their goals. That's what the paradigm is for. That's what the guilt is for. You should be doing this for somebody else. Go ahead.
Well, one thing I want to point up is your comment that joy is invulnerable to disruption. Isn't that an interesting contemplation? Joy is invulnerable to disruption. I just want to mention this because it was so funny. Every morning we do the meditations with Anne and Rhoda. And the other day we were doing a meditation and Anne happened to be sitting by the highway.
It sounded to us like she was sitting by the highway.
These cars were like going by.
Whoosh. She'd be talking and
whoosh.
I know, loving your consciousness and everything, and I'll be doing.
And that made us laugh because we were like, yeah, I've had that certainly had that experience before, being in downtown Manhattan where sirens are going and everything like that. And I'm just doing this walking meditation. I am trust my sirens that are one with me.
So,
what I mean? It's such an example of the peace of God, cultivating the peace of God within yourself, no matter what the situation.
Yeah. Where's the joy? Where's the only irritation is the thing getting irritated at the siren, because the siren is not being irritating.
Right. So we had plenty of lessons with that this week, and so heaven is in the moment, and in the moment, no matter what's going on, you can experience joy if you choose that. I just love that.
But you don't have to choose it. No pressure.
Yeah, but you don't have to, right? Truly. All right, so here we go.
3.
The ego is the part of the mind that believes in division.
Clearly.
How could part of God detach itself without believing it is attacking him? If you identify with the ego, you must perceive yourself as guilty. Whenever you respond to your ego, you will experience guilt and you will fear punishment. The ego is quite literally a fearful thought.
Right. Not alive, not
A
dangerous,
thought.
not, has no agency.
Wow. The ego is quite literally a fearful
thought. And it's supposed to, because it believes you're in a dangerous mind. We programmed it to respond and believe. The paradigms of the ego are that we live in a dangerous world and that we need to manage that dangerous world.
And the last part of that paragraph says, fear of retaliation from without follows because the severity of the guilt is so acute that it must be projected.
I'm not doing it. Now you're doing it. The world is doing it. I'm not, I don't trust you. You're being dangerous. It's just, it's like, oh, I'm actually, we'll do this in the obstacles to peace, but we do as human beings confirmation bias, right?
Oh,
we
sure.
only look and count the things that support our own version of the story, or we remember it in a certain way in which the telling gives us, kind of the Fox News channel.
Marathon. You're the one hurting me. It's not me.
Oh, I know. And he goes, I wouldn't have responded this way if you weren't so horrible.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing A Course in Miracles, but that's it's another. I had no choice but to respond this way.
Right, exactly.
So So fear is separation, And the reminder is that the ego's job is to manage a dangerous world. And without their dangerous world, there is no ego.
It's a thought system.
And it's a thought system. Okay, so and this is again what we call the authority problem. We're not doing it. The ego isn't beating your heart or breathing your lungs or any of that. It's a thought system. It's a paradigm in which we as human beings have created, and we're creating a culture and a being out of it. And we can let it go. It's out of control. The authority problem. We're not even doing any of this. And we didn't steal our life from God. We didn't run away from it. And we're like little thieves from God. And this is actually one of the oldest myths in the world, stealing from God.
Oh, right.
It's one of the oldest myths in the world. Stealing fire from heaven.
Oh, yeah.
It's insane. The request she makes in this paragraph, paragraph D, is to identify. I can see you, but don't respond to the ego's thoughts. Because if you do, and you can watch when you do, because you will. Watch when you do, you'll see the miscreation happen. You'll see the attention divide itself up and chop stuff up. It'll make highs and lows. It'll create a hierarchy. It'll create hierarchies of being. It'll create preferences, and it'll create befores and afters, and ifs and thens. That's a miscreation. It miscreates through a divided lens, like taking the color white and turning it into the colors of the spectrum.
Right.
It's still all white if you're looking at it right. But we're creating it into all these things. So she gives us a test. It's really easy. The test is guilt is a sign that we've listened to the ego's thought system. That's why you want to be present in your body. Why you don't want to suppress ego urges or body urges or thoughts in your mind. You don't want to suppress anything. Let it through you. Let it go. The test is if you feel guilt or shame, then we've listened to the ego's thought system. And it's a request for you. That's just an example, a part of that part of our thoughts where we have not healed yet. We can let it go. It's not like it's not going to come up again. It will. We can let it go and choose a higher thought. The reminder here is that guilt breeds fear and attack, and we project attack. So that whole paradigm starts to flow out from all of this. Guilt is a sign we've listened to the ego's thought system. So now we're in the ego's thought system, and then we're in fear of attack and projecting attack. People are out to get me. I'm not safe. And now we're back in a dangerous world that I have to manage. And the ego's back in charge again. Bum, bum, bum. And you're not creating. Now you're giving all your creativity to the world's thought system, in which is creating our suffering. Chapter 4, or section 4. She's just asking us to understand when we do this. It's a thought system. We can change our mind. It's the ego's thought system. And this is ego. What's the chapter's name? I want to get to the chapter's name. The chapter's name is ego. Yeah, healing and wholeness is the chapter, and this is the ego's use of guilt. So what is healing and wholeness? But knowing our place in the world, what we're supposed to do, and when we're supposed to do it, and how. That's healing and wholeness. Nothing can stop you from what is yours is to do, and what you are is the cooperative component with all that is. It's marvelous, absolutely marvelous.
Okay, whatever you accept into your mind has reality for you. It is your acceptance of it that makes it real. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Basic, wonderful concept to really know. Whatever you accept into your mind has reality for you. It is your acceptance of it that makes it real. You must learn to think with God. To think with Him is to think like Him. This engenders joy, not guilt, because it is natural. Guilt is a sure sign that your thinking is unnatural. Unnatural thinking will always be attended with guilt because it is the belief in sin.
Unnatural thinking. I love this. So the filter It's the filter. This is what I call like the filter of your mind, or like who's on the throne. We see the filter. You recognize the things that you see. See the world through. You know, those aren't good or bad. We should know them about yourself. It's the filter of the mind. What you accept into your reality, what you accept into your mind has reality for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, we create a queer identity or a woman or whatever it is. What I've accepted into my mind has reality for me. It is profoundly that big and that normal and simple.
Mm-hmm.
The filter of our mind, that's the filter of our mind. Or who is on the throne? Remember last week it was like the end of the ego is like trying to be the perfect person with the perfect body and everything like that, trying to be the empress. It's also a decision maker. So whatever you accept into your mind has reality for you. Either the thought system of the ego, right? You're gonna think like an 11-year-old in high school, or trying to be the most popular kid in class, or your whole world ends if you don't have the right tennis shoes, or whatever the children are doing these days. Or you can develop this trust, this calling from the Holy Spirit that is your right mind. That is your Holy Spirit. That is your right mind. It's the thing that you rely on. It's this compelling voice of truth, and it's joyful. That's what she says. When she says, learn to think with God. It's completely natural. And in the way the Course of Miracles talks about it, it's your damn inheritance. Right? It's our inheritance. Come into your inheritance. Accept your inheritance as the thought of the mind of God. Because she says guilt is unnatural. Because it's the belief that you got it wrong, God's mad at you, and you're just a little petulant. That's the way I think about it right now, and I get into this all the time. It goes, I've done something horrible, I just need to be punished, or something like that. It's absurd. It's unnatural. It's a part of the dangerous world. Sin and judgment as an assault, right? It's a justified defense. We were talking about, Marisol said, I wouldn't have, don't make me hit you, you it made me hit you. So this sin and judgment is an assault on the real world, because none of it's true. Our judgment about the way things should be isn't true. You know why? Because they're not that way. They're this way because everything that works is made it this way. This is the right way. It's very odd that we would be so upset and guilty for the way things are. When this is the only way it could be.
Could be, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So the response to sin and guilt she's saying, is that it points to our own lack of love, our own lack of awareness, our own lack of knowing that. Knowing who we are. This joy, we think the joy is coming to us instead of us. And remember the tools of the ego. We've been spent 2 weeks on the tools of the ego: suppress, control, conceal, and judge. Suppress, control, conceal, and judge. You can recognize those tools. And the promise. So the promise, the response that we have in this, in the sense of guilt, is sin and guilt point to a lack of love. Our own sense of understanding that we don't feel this lack of love. And at the very end, she says, I know you don't feel this lack of love, but I promise you, you will find it. And the ego only ever says you don't have it. I am promising you that you will find it.
You will find the love
that you're looking for.
Okay, you said lack of love, so I'm trying to clarify.
Boy.
Your mind is running.
The transcript
fast.
on this is going to be horrible.
No,
okay. I'm just kidding. So the promise is that you will succeed in finding love. Yeah. Sin and guilt point to our beliefs that we don't have enough love or don't have access to love.
Mm-hmm.
So we think that is a truth about ourselves. That's inside the paradigm of a dangerous world.
Mm-hmm.
So even inside the paradigm of a dangerous world, we says, I deserve more love. And that is where the Holy Spirit comes in. we can see that calling. Where is the love? So,
where is the love you said was mine, all mine, till the end of time? All right. Here we go. Okay. Any comments before we go on? Okay. So let's go here.
5.
The guiltless mind cannot suffer. Being sane, the mind heals the body because it has been healed.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
The sane mind cannot conceive of illness because it cannot conceive of attacking anyone or anything.
Okay, so the guilt does have expression in the physical world, and guilt expressed in the physical world. The Course in Miracles calls it illness, and this is the mind-body connection. We know there is a mind-body connection. There's a somatic. We use somatic. We've done a lot of research. People store trauma in their shoulders, or their back, or their neck, or their stomach. There's all kinds of research that's been done on this. We do store trauma in this. So if we to physically feel it, to physically allow it to move through your body, and Ramsey is a good example of this because he tells us how wonderful he feels after a massage and how healing the massage is. So and we can I'll take an example from Ramsey. It's like of this all the different layers of your healing make available to you, make available to us, right? So there is a mind-body connection. Now, what she says is the guiltless mind cannot suffer. So there's a difference between illness and suffering. Now, you can be you can be cooking a meal for the love of your life and still burn your hand, right? But you might not suffer. I might forget about it and say, have you ever been having such a good time that you look down and you're like, oh my God, I'm bleeding.
Right, you didn't even notice it.
Didn't even notice it?
Yeah.
That is a real good example of when we're and you're probably healed from that wound pretty easily and pretty quickly. So a guiltless mind cannot suffer. So she's trying to move away from the suffering and the guilt. So there's illness that keeps happening and is designed to distract us. And then there's what happened that refused to heal that we keep in place so we don't heal, or so we don't wake up. So it's a distraction. There's both of the things what she's talking about. And she calls illness a magical solution, and that means that it solves the problem that you don't have to work on yourself anymore.
Oh, that's
Get sick, I'm always sick, So illness has a magical solution. And so because what we really want to do is answer this calling. I want to be a carpenter. I want to be I want to do this thing. I want to learn to knit. I want to play with my I have this calling, this yearning to do, this calling. And I can't do it because I'm sick. We use sickness, as an excuse not to participate in the conscious creation of what ours is to do with God. And that's what the calling is about. We are refusing to do with God what God is asking us to do, that we're going to be really, really good at. It's going to make us happy. But we want, and we do want to do it, but we have to admit that we want to do it. And our illnesses aren't slowing us down to do it, no matter what we say about it. And so she says that we reach suffering early in this, and realize we could, when we in our body and we make this body connection, we realize the suffering quicker than maybe we normally would. And we also realize, oh, this isn't working. I don't like the way this feels, because in my body it's making my chest tight. Not my words in my mouth today. What's in my body? How is this making me feel? So you're just like, oh, I don't like this suffering. I don't like what guilt is doing to my body. It makes me feel. This isn't working. And believe it or not, no one asks for suffering. They believe they deserve suffering so that they could feel better later. And the way they get to feel better later is suffering. So no one's asking for suffering. They want to suffer so they can be happy later. So they can earn their happiness. Wow. And she says, I know that all of this sounds a little strange to you guys right now, but even in the dangerous world that you think you're all alone in, and there's this kind of crazy, you have to do it all yourself, and you make it up and have to figure everything out by yourself, and you can't trust anybody. Actually, none of that's even true anyway, and that you're not even alone in a dangerous world. That there's even people that are out looking out for you, even though you think it's a dangerous world and you can't do it and it's horrible. And you're still not alone and friendless. You know, it's like, okay, my God, can I stop trying to get it right then?
Yeah.
Can I get off this paradigm? Can I have this body? Can I learn from this body? Can I have this mind-body connection, answer the call, and not feel guilty about how it's all unfolding, and it shouldn't be this way because, you know, it should be happening on the coast of Monaco or something, you know, some more beautiful place. I don't know. Different latitude should be happening differently. I get that sometimes. So it's number 6.
All right, let's see how
making sure how we doing. Okay, we got
something in the chat. Hold
there we go.
on.
Yeah.
You are not the one hurting me. It's not me. You are the one hurting me.
It's total projection.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It's absolute projection. And
yeah.
Parent. My mother would grab the wooden spoon and she'd say, "This is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you."
Oh, and then she'd start hitting you.
You know.
Oh,
so
funny.
There we are.
Okay. The question, what do you want, must be answered.
This is where she moves on.
You are answering it every minute and every second, and each moment of decision is a judgment that is anything but ineffectual. Its effects will follow automatically until the decision is changed. The Holy Spirit and the ego are the only choices open to you. God created one, and so you cannot eradicate it. You made the other, and so you can eradicate it. What you made can always be changed. Delusional ideas are not real thoughts, although you can believe in them. As part of his thought, you cannot think apart from him.
Which is really good news. And
it is, and it's reminiscent of the
37
workbook lessons. My mind is part of God's. I am very holy. That's number 35. My mind is part of God's. I am very holy, and my holiness envelops everything I see. My holiness blesses the world. There's nothing my holiness cannot do. My holiness is my salvation. I am blessed as the Son of God. So it just goes.
God goes with me wherever I go.
Yeah. God is my strength. Vision is his gift. God is my source. I cannot see apart from him. God is the light in which I see. God is the mind with which I think, which is the one I was looking for. God is the mind with which I think. And that just blesses me. Every time I read that, God is the mind with which I think. Now it's taking on a different, a sort of a deeper understanding, you know?
Okay, so we have this mind-body connection, right? And we have this filter in our mind, this of the world, and this either we're not doing it right. We have this filter that we're trying to manage the world through, right? And we found out, and that how insane the ego. We're discovering how insane the ego is, and how it truly uses guilt to suppress our creativity. And even how uncomfortable the ego is with joy. Okay? And she's asking us to examine when we feel threatened. And that there's joy here, and that we're actually we're thinking about what we're letting into our mind we're using to create the paradigms in which we can't have what we want, in which we're living in a dangerous world. And that's the method. Realize you're in the body. I'm suffering. I don't like how this feels. What is going on? I feel this way. I thought this. So if I'm feeling guilty and I'm feeling horrible, I must be wrong. I don't have to suffer over this. What is happening? I am not, even though I feel like it, I'm not actually alone in this dangerous world.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and the thought system that she says is paramount of understanding is, and we've been learning about this. We learned it in chapter 2. What do you want? We're revisiting that because every second of every moment we're answering that question. Apparently, you are answering this question: what do you want? Every minute and every second, in every moment. Because what are we doing? We're choosing about whether or not we're going with the ego of the Holy Spirit, whether or not we're going to go with the paradigm of the world in which we're guilty and ineffectual and can't have what we want and it's dangerous, or it's joyful, we live in heaven and everything's connected and working for our good. What do you want? And the only choice is really whose answers the question, because they both have answers. Who's asking and who's answering this question? And that is the way we talk about where is your believing attention? And that's why we say, what do you want? You want what Holy Spirit wants, or you want things to work out, and you realize that you don't really know. And when you let things be in charge of the Holy Spirit, or the voice that likes you, things turn out better. So we learn to build on that. The only choice is, where are we going to give our believing attention? We're going to give it to the Holy Spirit. We're going to give it to the ego. The Holy Spirit says, the Holy Spirit is something that we cannot eradicate, which is good. We cannot get rid of. I can't lose it, right? I can't put my purse down on the train and get off the train.
Can't put your Holy Spirit down on the train.
No, you can't put the Holy Spirit down. You cannot eradicate it. You cannot. It's unchangeable. It's irreversible. Holy Spirit is the same thing as heaven and peace, and it's one. Okay, so that's what if I'm going to like evaluate this thing, that's reliable. That's what I want. So the ego is something that I have made. Now we've all made, and there's only one ego because we're all doing it. And we're maintaining this system. We're always modifying and changing the system as well. We made it so we can change it. And this ego doesn't actually do any thinking. It's actually just repeating. Ever thought about that? Your ego just repeats. It doesn't create. What you've heard before, what it's said before. There aren't any new ideas in your ego. Your ego doesn't create anything. It just repeats. It repeats recordings, ideas, and things that we have learned. Conditioning. The old trauma. And the recordings, it just repeats. The ego is not creative. It just repeats. And it creates delusional ideas of a dangerous world. And it creates us as the poster victim, in which we have to do everything.
This is paragraph 7. Irrational thought is disordered thought. Guilt feelings are always a sign that you do not know this. They also show you that you believe you can think apart from God and that you want to. Every disordered thought is attended by guilt at its inception and maintained by guilt in its continuance. If the sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for himself, and I assure you that it is, then the responsibility for what is atoned for cannot be yours. The purpose of the atonement is to save the past in purified form only.
Okay, so what do we mostly feel guilty about?
The past.
The past. So she said, look, I know these things happened to you, and I know you wish they happened better, and maybe they could have happened better, maybe they could have been all kinds of stuff, and I know the stories that you tell. That's fine. They're also in the past. If we would join and understand the atonement, what it means, what that would be is that we would change the story. We would see that it comes back to us in purified form. That's like the change in the story. It's like, when you go back and you're back to a family gathering, you tell all your stories, and your brothers and sisters tell a different story. irrational. This is irrational and disorder of thought. She says it's actually, when we think with the ego, when we think inside this paradigm of I'm alone and friendless and all of this, we've been talking about it. Show that you to believe you can't actually think apart from God, but so you're not thinking. Do we get that? We're just not thinking. We're not. If you're not creating, you're not thinking. You're giving your energy to repeating. Irrational irrational and disordered thought are not thinking, because they're guilt motivated, because they're motivated by a threat that doesn't actually exist. In fact, the problem to mitigate a threat that doesn't actually exist and isn't real also isn't real and is also ineffectual. It's this loop. The solution of undoing is what she calls this, like a pouring it over your past. This solution that's poured over your past and purifies it all and just keeps the love and the joy and the truth from it, so we can give it away and we can learn and grow and heal from it. The solution that we pour on the past and the future, whatever, is the atonement. Is we're all doing this together. You're not guilty for it. We're not guilty for it. We didn't get it wrong, and neither did they. It's called the solution of undoing. Atonement as the solution of undoing. And this solution eradicates what is not true, like washing it out of your hair. And so the request is to let the past be purified. And that can be really, really, really hard. As much as we're attached to the past and the wrongs that have done to us, and oh my God, let the past be purified as much as you can today. Learn from it. Forgive it. Because it had to happen, because it did. Why? Whatever, we're going to find out. But we can let it go and let it go through us. And when we remember it, let it move through again. Let it move through us again, so we can learn and we can heal. Because this is a learning device. And if it's coming up and it's coming up again, then we're not through. We're still healing, and we're still working with it. And that is the mind-body connection. And the body stores it so for us to heal it. That's and beautiful. It's completely natural.
That's so beautiful. I'm reminded of something I think it was Kelly Barber said, was letting it go, which is what you just said, is letting it go through us. Yeah. Letting it go through. So it's not pushing away the feeling or the this or the that. It's actually feeling the feeling and letting it go through.
One more
paragraph and then we'll open it up. The continuing decision to remain separate is the only possible reason for continuing guilt feelings. We have said this before, but did not emphasize the destructive results of the decision. Any decision of the mind will affect both behavior and experience. What you want, you expect. This is not delusional. Your mind does make your future, and it will turn it back to full creation at any minute if it accepts the atonement first. It will also return to full creation the instant it has done so. Having given up its disordered thought, the proper ordering of thought becomes quite apparent.
Okay, that's the altar call. And that's a pretty good one. It's a pretty good one. This is about separation and atonement again, about the major problem, how we deal with the major problem, and one of the major things that the ego uses, or the world uses, in order to keep us from what is our calling, what was ours to do in the world. And guilt keeps us in this thought system of separation, just like it's real, like it's just like la la la. That's just the way the world works. Guilt keeps us in this thought system of separation. It's destructive to everything that we hold in value, that we say we do. Togetherness and love and trust and authenticity and consistency. We're returning our creative attention back to the Holy Spirit. That's what this whole is about. Guilt is taking away our creative attention. We are returning our creative attention back to the Holy Spirit and away from guilt and fear and managing this dangerous world. So that's what the lesson is today. So
Ding, 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 ding,
ding, ding, ding, ding. I'm your favorite anarchist preacher. I'm Glen Ganaway. This is Loving My Life, the Reverend Yolanda. Yay. The guilt is